Hey, you talking to my girl?
Oh shit, here we go.
Well, she was just admiring my ride.
One of the things I hate the most is when a film that I love has a sequel which sucks. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. You see the trailers, you get hyped up, you book the tickets, and then you come out of the cinema thinking,
well, that was f***ing dreadful.
To make a great film in the first place is a huge challenge, and so a bad sequel often begs the question, why have the filmmakers failed so badly when they succeeded so brilliantly before? I believe that all bad sequels suffer from the same core problem. The filmmakers fail to understand what made the original film so great in the first place, and this core problem gets applied differently to various films. Firstly, it may sound obvious, but the film has to be about the same set of characters on a continuation of the same story. Otherwise it's not a sequel but an imitation of the original film that just happens to share the same name for marketing purposes. I don't care that Vin Diesel appeared at the end of Tokyo Drift with that look on his face for a few seconds. That was not a Fast and Furious film. Sometimes filmmakers think that by taking the most memorable parts of a film, they can create a sequel which distills the essence of the original.
Wrong.
Films are complex structures.
So we alternate. Scene here, scene there, scene there.
If you think of a building with foundations, walls, furniture and everything else, most people won't comment on how strong the foundations are since that's not what they notice. What they notice is furniture, the funny doormat or the cute photos on the walls. But if you try to replicate that building without the strong foundation that it came with, then no matter how good the decor is, the building will collapse. And that's something that people do notice. Films are no different. If I mention the film Rocky, what do you remember? Most people remember the theme tune and the training montage, but that alone is not what made the film great. The film's brilliance comes from spending the majority of the story getting to know what sort of person Rocky is. All that time spent with Rocky, getting to know that he has morals, that he has ambitions, seeing him struggle, seeing him in his rundown cold apartment, and finding out that all he ever wanted was to have a shot at making it big in boxing, is what gives meaning to the songs and the training montage. It creates an underlying powerful reason which images and music alone could never achieve. Take those reasons away and you lose the soul of the film. The original is a masterpiece of character development, a metaphor for the American dream, a classic. The sequels have never come close.
I must break you.
Sometimes the reason why a character is so memorable is because they're not the main character, and that their screen time is limited, and so they get to maintain an aura of mystery about themselves. And since they're not on screen most of the film, audiences get to look forward to seeing them. You only start to miss someone when they're not there. This is the case with Anthony Hopkins' Hannibal Lecter. The sequels had much more of him on screen, but they were never as good as Silence of the Lambs. This is because by limiting his screen time, it creates mystery, so you don't know what he's going to do, and every time he pops up on screen, your eyes are glued onto him. A sequel also has to feel like the original film. This means that the cinematography, music, set design, and everything else should come from the same understanding as the original film. Terminator Salvation didn't feel like a Terminator film. It felt like a modern apocalyptic war film, but not a Terminator film. What I wanted, what I expected was this. The audience, after a few minutes of watching the film, need to be reminded that they are watching a creation which is related to its predecessor. That's a difficult task when the film doesn't look or sound like what you remember. To get a script made into a film takes a huge amount of work. The mountain to climb to get a new film made is much greater than the mountain to get a sequel made. This is because studios know that the success of the original will guarantee audiences for the sequel. This lowering of the bar means that often the filmmakers don't work as hard as they did on the first film. Also, corporate greed means that the people who hold the rights to the sequel don't care about making the best film. They care about making the most money out of the sequel, and so will blindly follow what audiences have told them they want. But films are complex pieces of work. They might be working on 12 different levels to get a specific emotional response from the audience, but the viewers are seldom aware of all of the levels at play. In fact, most of the levels are often at play unbeknownst to the viewers, which is partly why they work in the first place. Complex pieces of work. Let's talk about the greatest Christmas film ever made, Die Hard. What makes that film great is that the character that Bruce Willis plays is just a normal cop, an everyday kind of guy who's gone to LA to sort out things with his wife. A relatable setup that allows guys all over the world to empathize with him. This means we root for him when Alan Rickman decides to take his wife hostage and steal from her company's vault. But in the later sequels, he's not an everyday man, he's jumping onto the back of an F-35. The film stops being Die Hard and just becomes a generic action movie that happens to have Bruce Willis in it. Now let's take a look at a sequel, which is one of the best ever made, The Godfather Part 2. Here is a film which creates the same feel as the original, with the same makers going in the same direction. It doesn't get carried away with only trying to copy the best parts of the original. It keeps Michael's story to only half of the entire film, and it avoids repetition by taking the story further than before. In other words, developing his character arc even more. A sequel needs to be the same, but different. The same, but further is a better way to put it. If filmmakers follow these guidelines, then they can create more than just a sequel. If they devote themselves to the same standard as the original, then that's when they can create something else entirely. A legend in its own right.
So we alternate scene here, scene there, scene there.